Welcome to the Worship Corner podcast from Got Worship Media.
On today's Worship Corner podcast, we are thrilled and honored to have with us today as a special guest the artist and songwriter behind songs like this.
Yeah, he loves us. Whoa, how he loves us. Whoa, how he loves us. Whoa, how he loves.
John Mark McMillan joins us to talk about his latest album, Economy, as well as some tour dates along the way, and we discuss songwriting with a pro like John Mark McMillan himself. All that and more coming up on this edition of the Worship Corner podcast.
And now, your host for the podcast, GotWorship.net's own Jason Whitehorn.
And we're joined today by artist John Mark McMillan. John Mark has a wonderful, wonderful new album out that's called The Economy. And John, we want to talk to you for a little bit, pick your brain. Man, you've got so much wealth and knowledge when it comes to songwriting that I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you some questions for our Got Worship audience. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited.
Now, listen, the current album, we go from the medicine all the way to economy, and there's slight departures there, and some of the, not necessarily writing style, but some of the themes that are going on within this album. Tell us about the path that you took there as a songwriter to get to economy.
Well, I mean, there's a number of years between writing the two albums. So for instance, I released the medicine independently, and then I re-released it on a label about a year and a half later. So a lot of those songs I was writing, the years before I released that album. And so some of the songs on the medicine are, 5, 6, 7 years old. Some even as old as 8 years. So, I was in a totally different place when I was writing the new album. And so I just kind of, it's not that I specifically tried to depart from the medicine, as much as I just kind of, I write a lot anyway, and so, it's just kind of sort of the next phase for me. I wasn't, the truth is I wasn't incredibly intentional about the songs that I wrote. I kind of look at an album as a collection of songs. So I don't so much write songs for an album as much as I put albums together of songs, So I don't know really where the medicine ended and where economy began for me, because I didn't have the season where I sat down and said, all right, I'm going to write a new album. It was just more of continued with my sort of obsession with this sort of songs that I'm working with. And so I don't know really what the journey was from the old album to the new. To me, it was, it's more of a mile marker, right? This album's done, but the writing, continued. And so you see some similar themes like of resurrection and things like that. I think the new album, if I did try and do anything, I tried just because I thought it was more interesting to be less abstract with my writing. Because that can be, I enjoy abstract writing, and I like I enjoy the aesthetic quality of words, that you can get when you're abstract, because you're not overly concerned about the subject matter, as long as it feels like what you're trying to say, but that sometimes can be a crutch. And so I thought, I want to try and be less abstract, and use fewer words this go around, as a challenge, maybe.
It's one of the beautiful things I think about the album Lyrically. There are a group of albums that I have that, as worship leaders, worship pastors, we are inundated all the time with what's new, what's current, what can we be listening to. And sometimes, let's be honest, those are songs that while yes, they may relate to the congregation, sometimes we need something to fill us up.
Sure.
And the words, you talk about the abstractness, but at the same time, the words that you use, it's things that you can wrap your mind around and say, wow, I didn't think about things like that. But at the same time, they're simple enough to where you can understand it. So worship leaders, man, I really encourage you to go out and get Economy, because it's such a great, man, just kind of pick you back up, make you think about a few things. lines in there about how we, I'm trying to think of the exact line. How we can see how we've been through the night, but still, at the same time we've been through, we've still seen the day. So we tend to, focus on things maybe that are of darker times, but forget about the fact that we've been through the daylights. Man, I just love the imagery that you have.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man.
And you're currently right now on tour too, John Mark and Friends.
Yep.
Tell how's the tour going?
It's going great. We actually, we've been on a break for about a week, and tomorrow we kick back into the tour in Charleston, South Carolina. So we'll be doing most of the Southeast for the next 2.5 weeks.
And as we talk about having friends, you're not without friends. You've got several guests that are joining you too as well along the way.
Yep. On this leg, we have a band called Kai Kai from Portland, and we have a band called Jude Moses, who are from here in North Carolina.
Fantastic, and looking forward to seeing you guys here too as well. Sunday here in Nashville, Tennessee, where we're centrally located out of. But a lot of great venues too as well that are going on. You can check that out at thejohnmark.com too as well. You can also learn more about the economy. Now, I'd be absolutely remiss if we didn't talk about one of the things I think that you've kind of unexpectedly become really triumphantly known for, and that's one little song that's out there called "How He Loves."
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier and bringing that up. This is really not a song that was intended as a worship song. It kind of came out of a really sincere place in your heart, out of some events that took place, and I think we all kind of know the story by now. But at the same time, the intent was never, if I'm not mistaken, to even write a worship song. Yet at the same time, I don't think there's too many of us that are in the listening audience that haven't led that several times in our own congregation.
Uh-huh.
What do you think? What do you think that says about, or the direction maybe that puts on our mind frame on what could be worship songs now versus, the older days of writing things that seemed more congregational because they were pretty, they were delicate, and this that can really take on a challenging topic, but at the same time explain God's love.
Sure. I think you have to think about, the word, congregational or corporate, you kind of have to look at that as those terms in different sorts of light, I think, as a writer, so I don't ever think, when I'm writing a song, I don't ever think, this is going to be, I'm going to sit down and write a song for this group of people to sing or this group of people to listen to, as much as I'm just trying to create a pure expression in the moment. Later on, I'll look at it and be like, okay, I think maybe people could use this song for this, so I don't think I've ever sat down, at least I've never sat down and come up with anything that I considered to be worth playing for anybody that where I sat down and thought, I'm going to do this for this specific reason. I've never been that intentional with the way I write. I think that, if you look at history and the kind of music and songs that people have sang and played throughout history, what we consider to be a quote, congregational song has only been that for a minute period of time in the Christianity, even back as far as the songs and the things that King David did in worship, when they wrote the Psalms. I think most people would not consider that to currently be congregational, even though it defined what worship is for an entire religion of people, is those things that happened in the Psalms. But the kind of music David played and the way they did things, so a lot of what we consider, congregational, what we're really talking about is culturally, it's a cultural idea, Sorry. I got a little pollen thing going on. But a lot of what we consider congregational is a cultural idea, and culture continues to change, And so I think sometimes that we forget that that people will go places that they haven't gone before, you know, and they'll sing things they haven't sung before. We just have to give them permission to do it, you know, and so I think it's funny because when I sang the song a lot, and I never had any issues with the song, you know, and then I'd be out and about and I'd hear people say, I don't know if I can do that in my church. And I'm like, well, I mean, we do it and it works. And they're like, okay, you know, and so then it's kind of somebody does it. And then all of a sudden, because that one person does it, all of a sudden it's like it gives people permission to sing it. So I remember there's people who wouldn't sing it until I was signed to a record label, you know, a conservative worship label. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, this song is okay now, because there's been a stamp of approval by, you know, by a ministry or a business, when the song has remained the same for 8 years, you know, for the most part. So I think we need to think much bigger than the way we think. Not because the stuff we do isn't great or that it isn't great to sing with a group of people, but what people will sing now, and not that singing itself is what's most important, but what people will sing now or connect with now is not necessarily the way things are going to be even in the next 3 to 5 years, and definitely not in the next 10 or 20 years, you know? So I think it's important to know your people and to cultivate worship in your people. And when you have a trust, you know, when people trust you, then they'll go in different places, you know, they'll go in different directions. And I think, you know, I think there's much more. I think the Bible gives us much more permission in the areas of worship than we usually give ourselves. There's so much more in the Bible that is considered worship. You know, even the Psalms themselves, you know, I think there's only about 15% of them are sort of what we'd consider happy or joyful, you know, and then the other, you know, sort of 75, 80 percent of them are story psalms. There's history. There's the angry psalms, the war psalms, the cursing psalms, the sad ones, the laments, you know. But for some reason, culturally at this point in time, we don't like to. We don't feel comfortable with the rest of the subject matter for some reason. We seem to want to focus on the joyful ones, which are certainly important, you know. But I think that it's also important to recognize that there's much more there for us as a body, as a people, to explore than what we always allow ourselves.
Well put. Well put. Now, I want to remind people of the website too as well, thejohnmark.com, tour dates there, and also information on your current release, as well as some great information that's there on the website. I always love hearing from people of all different walks of life.
Sure.
When you have those moments, whether or not they're moments of their struggle or maybe moments of chaos, we all have that one verse that we turn to. Is there any one particular verse that may be in good points, bad points, or anything within your life that you can always call on and give you that inner strength?
I honestly, I don't have one specific verse. It'd be different verses for different, you know, times of my life, you know. But I think the idea that God loves the world, you know, I mean, it's the most known Bible verse is, you know, God so loved the world that he gave his son, you know. And this idea that that God loves people, you know, and that God is about people, and a man who would give up his own son for something must be obsessed with that something he would give up his child for, you know. And so the idea that God would give up his son for people has to tell me that God is obsessed with people and he loves people, you know. And I think that whenever I think things don't feel right, something's going wrong, or I need to be brought back to that place of being centered, I think about the fact that that God is interested in me. You know, he's interested in us as a people, and he's interested in the people around me. You know, and so I think sometimes, in the course of life, we get distracted by things like our jobs, or even our ministries, or or the things we're involved in. And it's very easy to forget that what's important is people. At the end of the day, my song, my ministry, my job, my bank account, my reputation, all that kind of stuff is important. At the end of the day, what's really important is people, because Jesus died for people. He didn't die for our programs. He didn't die for, he didn't die just for our organizations. And I think that our organizations are important because they serve people. But whenever we cease to serve people with what we do, then I think that we're lost. And so for me, it all goes back to that right there. God loved the world that He gave His Son.
Beautiful, beautiful insight on a verse that we tend to generalize, way too much. So what's next in the chapter for you?
For me, my wife is having our another baby, so our third child.
Congratulations!
In July, thanks. So after the tour, I'm actually going to go hang out in California a little bit with my dad, and then I'm going to come back, spend some time with my family. I'm going to do something in Brazil, and I'm going to come home, and my wife and I are going to have another baby. And then I'm hoping this summer to write another album or some sort of project. And I have a feeling it's going to be the most different thing that I've ever done. And so I'm excited to dig in and see what happens with this new project.
And we're excited for things that are yet to come. The album's called Economy. You can find out details on that. You can get it on iTunes and find retail stores too as well, and also information at thejohnmark.com. John Mark, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And that's all for today's Worship Corner podcast. We want to thank especially John Mark McMillan for being with us today. Remember, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard on the podcast, or about any ideas that you'd have for future podcasts, or any articles for the website, feel free to drop them our way at jason@gotworship.net. That's jason@gotworship.net. You can also find us on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Jason Whitehorn, or Got Worship at Got Worship. We're on Facebook as well, and you guessed that, www.facebook.com/Got Worship. Until next time, thanks and God bless.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Got a question for the podcast? Send them in to jason@gotworship.net. Make sure to visit us online at www.gotworship.net for even more resources for worship.